Good morning and welcome, one and all, or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you may be listening to this from. We're so glad to have you all out today. My name is Elias Holdman. I'm the educational representative here at Path International, and we're so pleased to have you all joining us today for our first Stride seminar Beyond the Article with Debbie Anderson and Blair McKissock. While you're listening, the line will remain muted. If you do have any questions, please type them into the question box located on your control panel. We'll be answering all of those at the end of the presentation. Blair McKissock is a recreational therapist that has been in the field of human-animal interaction and experimental education for over 20 years. She earned her BS in recreational therapy and her master's in education with a focus on human-animal interaction and is currently finishing her PhD in ecopsychology. She is a Path International registered therapeutic riding instructor, certified equine specialist, and master horsework equine-assisted learning facilitator. She serves as the chair of the Equine-Assisted Learning Community for Path International and advocates for standards and competencies in EAL. She is the author of Equio, Yoga on Horseback Method, and has written several equine-assisted resources and curricula. She is currently a visiting lecturer at Indiana University and serves as the co-founder of Horsework with Debbie Anderson, offering education and training in EAL. Debbie Anderson has been involved professionally in the EAAT business for over 35 years. After showing hunters and jumpers as a young girl, she graduated from college and worked as a veterinarian technician for a large equine practice. Her interest in working with children directed her to become an equitation instructor for a large show facility. 6 years and several world champions later, she started working in the therapeutic riding industry. Today, Debbie serves as the founder and executive director at Strides to Success and Horsework Education, located in Plainfield, Indiana. She spearheaded Strides to become the first center in the United States to become accredited in PATH's mental health standards. Her experience spans over 30,000 arena hours serving schools, mental health providers, and corporate leaders. Debbie served on the PATH board of directors from 2004 to 2010 and still sits on numerous committees. Debbie's qualifications include PATH certifications as both a CTRI and an equine specialist in mental health and learning, E3A corporate trainer, master horsework faculty, EGALA certification, and is also a board certified equine interaction professional in education. Debbie is a well-known speaker at many national and international conferences and has authored many curricula and resources. Debbie's passion is to support industry professionals by sharing best practices and helping centers work towards sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, your presenters.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm Blair McKissock.
And I'm Debbie Anderson.
And we're here to talk to you a little bit more about the article that we wrote in the past Strides issue and go beyond that a little bit more in depth into what equine-assisted learning is, what it looks like, kind of how everything arrived to where it is now and looking towards the future. So hang on, let's make sure we got that right. So when we talk about, that's right, having a little technical difficulty there. We're just going to basically talk about equine-assisted learning. We're going to talk about the evolution of where kind of we started back in the EFMA days and separating it and moving it into its own entity. We're going to talk about the PATH International development of the definition, the guidelines, and the competencies, and then we're going to talk about the future outlook and how we're going to move forward with equine-assisted learning. And we have a web link at the end of the presentation for all of the resources that we're going to talk about during the presentation. And just talking a little bit about who we are, we really have a passion for this business, and our mission together at Strides to Success and the Horsework Education Program is to really advocate and move the industry forward, raise the bar, and provide resources for people so that they can not only become better, more competent instructors, but also so that we can just raise the bar in the professionalism and the trajectory of our field. Debbie?
Yeah, absolutely. EAL has become our passion, and it grew. We started out as therapeutic riding instructors and loved that work, but found that there is so much more out there. And so it's been our mission to help educate people and to help share what experience we have had over the last 35 years, and so that people don't have to reinvent, the wheel. And we're all after best practice. We're after doing research and all kinds of things. So we're happy to be here and to share what we have learned about EAL. So with that being said, strides to success, just a little bit of background about our basic core model. We have 3 divisions that we focus on. Many of you might know our little 3-horse logo. Each one of those horses stands for a particular part of our business. The first segment is direct service. Our vision was to do enough direct service with enough diverse populations so that we could then create programs that could be duplicated and also evaluated and have them so that we could share those with other centers. And so the direct service piece, we probably serve maybe 65 people a week, which is not a real huge number, but it's just enough to validate the education and the research components that we do in creating industry curricula and industry resources that people can use. And our resource development piece is about, spreading that word, giving you all tools that you can recreate in your programs, or you can use them as a foundation and build on them, but they give people a starting point. And we love to hear how people take that work, take those curriculum and make them their own and adapt them and grow. And that's probably one of the most exciting things for us, is to see how they are catapulting people utilizing EAL.
And the other thing that makes that resource development piece really exciting is because we're collaborating with lots of other professionals. It's not just about what we do here at Strides, but it's creating a network of centers that have the same mission and that really want to create evidence-based practice and want to help support the industry in that way. And so the curriculum not only come from Strides, but it's more of an opportunity for people to develop programs that they want to put out there to help other centers grow and become sustainable as well. And the last piece about what we do is the education and the research. So the education piece is about providing workshops and opportunities for people to learn about equine-assisted learning, learn about how it can create a more sustainable business and how it can complement what they're already doing, and understand the differences between the different pieces. And then of course the hard skills of actually implementing equine-assisted learning and those competencies that we've identified. And then the last piece is the research. So we partner with universities like Indiana University to create evidence-based practice by evaluating the curriculum and to make sure that what we are doing in our direct service is at the cutting edge and is really creating an impact on people, and then evaluating that in a way that helps us better articulate what we do to other professions, to other professionals that we partner with, and to the community and the consumers that utilize equine-assisted learning and therapies as a resource in the community.
And the grant makers.
And the grant makers.
Yeah, the stockholders.
Yep. It's not easy to be in business, in an equine-assisted business, whether you're doing therapeutic riding, driving, vaulting, or psychotherapy. There's a lot less money to compete for, and we have to do a better job of making sure that we are really evaluating the efficacy of what we do.
Absolutely. And so I think one of the big things is shifting the way that you think about what you do in equine-assisted activities. I know coming from a therapeutic riding, background, and then prior to that, coming from a show background, you get in this mode of what you do, and you tend to keep a narrow focus. Whether you're riding hunters and jumpers, you're just focused on that, or Western or dressage or whatever you're doing. Well, the same thing is kind of true in equine-assisted activities and therapy, because whatever your specialty is, whether it's therapeutic riding or driving, you kind of tend to stay in that lane. But when we started our own business and started Strides, what I found is that in order to survive in business, you had to be flexible. And here we invested all of our energies and our education into becoming certified therapeutic riding instructors. We had the facility, we had the horses, we acquired all of the equipment and such, and yet it was still such a struggle to stay afloat, because our arenas would be empty during the day, and it would be really crowded, after school hours, and so it was a constant battle to try and stay afloat. So until EAL came along, and we started thinking a little bit differently about the different populations that we could serve and so on. So with EAL, I think the first benefit is to the staff, to us instructors, to the people that are doing the work. Because, I worked for a very large therapeutic riding center, and I have to admit the work was a little monotonous after 8-10 years of doing the same thing. And even the horses would kind of look at me like, oh, here comes that Johnny that's not well balanced, and I've got to be squeezed by two sidewalkers. And it just was kind of monotonous. And I hate to say that, because I'm passionate about what we do, but what a joy it was to do one therapeutic riding lesson, and then boom, the next client was doing groundwork out in the round pen, and the next client would be, sitting in a pasture doing herd observation. And it just, every single lesson took on a life of its own, and it became really client-centered work. And so for me as a staff member and as an instructor, I really like that. That was much easier to keep myself fresh. The benefits to the program, the facility, all of the assets that you have to run your daily business, to be able to maximize all of those assets, to have the horses working, all of the days. I mean, within those past standards, of course, but to have them engaged in work all the time, and to have the facility everywhere that you have a working space, to have that, in use, to see clients, fill your boards, and not only just from after school on, but during the days. That was really great. The benefit to the horses, Blair and I have the privilege of going around and teaching at a lot of different facilities throughout the country. And a lot of times we are working with therapeutic riding horses that are used to a very structured program. And when we come in and we're teaching EAL to their staff, it's so much fun, because the horses have no idea what we are doing. They're like, what? We're not getting saddled up? What? We're going out to the arena? What? We're free? We're at liberty? What is this about? Or even if there's music or something different, EAL provides a shift for the horses as well. And it's kind of revolved around a lot of play.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like play therapy for the horses. And so it fits in really nicely with trying to keep your horses engaged in their work, because it is different, or it can be very different.
And preventing some of that burnout that they experience.
Absolutely. The benefits to the community and to the clients are numerous. You know, when you think about the community and you think about the needs of the community, with EAL, we have broadened. There's a kind of a stereotype thinking in the community that therapeutic riding is just for children with disabilities. And maybe sometimes their first thought is, oh, well, that includes adults too. However, when you look at the broader umbrella and you look at, again, at the assets that you have in the farm, in the animals, in the environment, you know, it becomes a useful place, a peaceful place, and a place of healing for a lot of other different people. And we have been able to serve about just as many adults as we do children, with the expansion and the addition of EAL. And that can include the veterans, it can include working with domestic violence survivors, it can include working with cancer survivors, it can include working with corporations, doing team building, all kinds of different things, residential facilities, your children that are at risk for behaviors. It just pops your ability to serve many different people. Parents, parenting classes, reading, literacy, you know, all kinds of things. So the next benefit is supporting other professions. And I really like this one. This one again is a challenge was a challenge to me personally, because it made me raise the bar of the professionalism, and it made me learn new language about working with school systems and about working with teachers and administrators. It's just, you have to go and you have to learn a whole new language of that profession, and then come back to the barn and make your work relevant to them in their own language. And what a delight, what a challenge that is, you know, to do that. So between educators, between mental health providers working in the realm of mental health within the EAL scope, working with corporations, going into corporations and not knowing a thing about, you know, what they do, but exploring that and how can you make that relevant, and how can you make the horse program and EAL relevant to them in their setting. And that, my friends, is just an awesome challenge, a personal challenge, that requires a great deal of facilitation skills. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. The final thing is, the final benefit is contributing to the sustainability of your center. You know, Blair and I always teach that we think of our centers and the business of our centers as like a pie chart. And if we get one piece of the pie that is too dedicated to one particular entity, such as a school or a particular residential facility or whatever, it can make us vulnerable if they run out of funding or if they don't have funding for the next year. And we didn't like to be vulnerable. We wanted to be more sustainable. We wanted to have more earned income that we could count on. And then in support and in addition, do our fundraising pieces and such, but not depend on those fundraising pieces for the vital necessities of the center. And so by branching out and including EAL in our program, we can do that. We get funding from a lot of different sources because we're able to do EAL.
Well, if we want to kind of explore a little bit more on exactly what EAL is and how we define it, do you want to talk a little bit about separating it from mental health?
Sure. Years ago, it kind of came to our mind that EAL was kind of lumped in with EFP, and that really wasn't a healthy arrangement for either one. If looking long term for EFP, equine facilitated psychotherapy, what the ultimate goal at some point would be, wouldn't it be wonderful if that had its own code and that mental health providers could have a code that they could bill insurance and such with? I mean, that would be just great. And at some point I envision that will probably happen. But the first piece is keeping that EFP very clean. And EAL, if you had those together, EAL was a little mucky. I'm sure that you've all heard about, staying in your own lane and how easy it is to slip into, the mental health role if you're doing EAL. And that is so true. They are very closely related, but they are very different as well. And so separating it with the professionals that do it, separating it by what you focus on when you facilitate it, what you do with the client and where you go and how you keep it focused. And we've put down here the official definition that PATH adopted as we separated the EFP from the EAL. And EAL is an experiential learning approach that promotes the development of life skills. And I wish we could underline life skills for educational, professional, personal goals through equine-assisted activities. But the life skills piece is the really important piece. That is the common thread through all EAL, whether you're working in any of those entities with education or corporate or personal coaching, anything like that, the life skills is the magic to EAL. And when we separated that, and as we created, the committee created the definition for EAL, they decided to look outside of PATH and see what is it that the world views is the definition of life skills. And so the World Health Organization is very well respected in just in general in the big world outside of PATH. They defined it very clearly, and their definition was focused on things like decision making, problem solving, and things like that contributed to basic life skills. And I thought, or we thought, the committee thought that, wow, that is it, because that's what we do in EAL. We teach people about finding their way of making good decisions and solving problems and using creativity and being responsible and being respectful, to all involved and so on. And so that's a little bit of the history about how it became separated and how we defined it.
What's interesting about that, I was thinking it was almost 7 or 8 years ago that we started trying to put some teeth and wrap our brains around what we were doing. And part of that is because there was a whole group of professionals who just didn't fit anywhere. It's like, especially being a recreation therapist, I swim in that gray area of not necessarily being, a mental health clinician. I'm not a licensed mental health therapist, but I offer therapeutic riding, but we offer this other service that's different. And coming from an experiential education background, again, we always do processing and debriefing and experiential education, but it's not therapy. And so there was this whole group of professionals that didn't necessarily have a home because they either came to therapeutic riding with a whole other bag or a whole other professional designation like corporate trainer or wellness coach or teacher, educator. All of these, they're bringing in the expertise of their profession, a coach, and merging it with therapeutic riding. So it became something more, but we didn't necessarily have a home. So part of that was also trying to say, what do we call it? And we came up with the equine-assisted learning versus equine-facilitated learning, partly because of that separation from equine-facilitated psychotherapy, but also because that was the more accepted term. And the other was to look, again, outside of PATH. We are a part of a much bigger movement of nature-based therapies when we're working with the horses, the farm environment, being outside, all of these things contribute to what makes the work with the horses so beneficial. And then you have the enigma of the horse and why that all fits. So through this process over the last 7 years, we've determined that we have the broadest scope of practice. We can work with the largest group of population or consumers within our communities that are in need. But again, we have to define then the professional who's coming to the doormat. We have to say, well, we've got duly qualified professionals. Those are professionals who have both the horse experience and they have experience within another field like coaching or corporate training or education or again, recreation therapy, and defining those people. Then we have people who are coming in as horse professionals, but they want to gain the other piece of equine-assisted learning and learning how to facilitate above and beyond therapeutic riding. And then we have those professionals who are the coaches and all the professional designation, but they have no horse experience, but they want to, become involved. They see what we're doing. So it becomes a very collaborative atmosphere, which is awesome, but it also just creates this very large scope that we have to then figure out what makes equine-assisted learning different than maybe therapeutic riding or different than the others, just in the fact of what are the extra competencies do you need in order to effectively facilitate a session without going outside the scope of your practice and maybe into therapy or into something that you don't necessarily have the expertise. And when we work with vulnerable populations like victims of trauma or veterans, we have to make sure that we can create that experience and stay within the scope of our work. So it's not only defining who we are as a profession and what are the competencies we need to do the work, but also the guidelines in which we operate. So we also created a set of guidelines that kind of gives some framework around what it looks like and why, again, we're asking people to have different competencies above and beyond what their primary certification or credential might be. We've got a kind of short little fun video that we produced to help people. Oh no, we'll have to put this on YouTube, but to show you guys the differences between the different types of equine-assisted learning and equine-assisted therapy. We get lots of questions all the time, and there seems to be a perception around equine-assisted learning is all education. or equine-assisted learning doesn't necessarily fit within somebody's business when they might already be doing it. So we're trying to right now create some opportunity and create some resources to help people define it. And so this is one of the things that we produce. So we hope you enjoy it. It's kind of fun. Hopefully you can hear it.
So what is equine-assisted learning and therapy? First, what do you call it? You may have heard it called many different names, like equine-assisted or equine-facilitated, or another name, but the term equine-assisted learning and therapy generally is the most accepted. For the most part, whatever it's called means the same. Really depends on who's facilitating the session, which could be a team of professionals, a horse professional and a human professional, or it could be a single person who is duly qualified with competencies in both horse and human areas. It comes down to who's facilitating and as to whether or not it's therapy or learning. It can be a gray area. So what is it? Well, we typically define equine-assisted learning as an experiential method of developing life skills facilitated by a qualified professional to meet educational, professional, and personal goals through intentionally designed interactions with horses. And equine-assisted therapy as a treatment intervention intended to relieve or heal a diagnosed condition facilitated by a mental health professional through intentionally designed interactions with horses. So hope that helps clear things up, and stay tuned for more videos powered by Horsework.
So again, that was just kind of a fun little video that we put together to help, again, provide some assistance in helping people to talk about what we do. So one of the things that we wanted to really make sure of as we went through this process of defining it and creating the competencies, this is not just what, you know, Debbie and I think. It's not necessarily our opinion on equine-assisted learning. There are some really, really amazing people who started doing this work a long time ago and have been kind of considered what we would call mothers, fathers, grandmothers. You know, I kind of consider myself one of the cousins or aunts in this big family of equine-assisted learning. But we talked and reached out to as many people as we could to ask them, how do you define it? What do you call it? Why is it different? Because one of the trends that we're seeing is that there are a lot of people out there who are saying that they do equine-assisted learning, and they don't necessarily understand the difference. They're potentially could be putting people in unsafe situations. We see a lot of just kind of this explosive growth of different names. People call it kind of their branded name, or they call it, we hear equine-assisted coaching, we hear equine-facilitated learning, we hear equine-assisted education, equine experiential education. There's so many different terms for kind of this same area of like that same broad scope that we were talking about earlier. And that's part of the reason why we set off on this mission to try and put some teeth around it, because to the consumers that are looking to us to provide a service for them to meet their need, they get confused and they don't necessarily know the difference between somebody who is reputable, who has PATH credentials, who's been through a vetted training, versus somebody who just hangs a shingle out and says, I do therapeutic riding, I do equine-assisted learning, and I offer therapy because of the therapeutic benefits of being with a horse. So we want to make sure that the information that's put out there is consistent, and that there are resources available that somebody can say, hey, I want to go to a training to become, to do equine-assisted learning, and we want to go learn more information. Well, you can use the competencies as a guide for, are they teaching these particular things? You can use the guidelines for operation. There aren't a lot of standards yet that are specifically related to equine-assisted learning. And so you can use the guidelines, again, as just to put a framework around what you're doing. And, you know, it's the both exciting and scary thing. Exciting thing is this is wide open, and we're still learning and we're still researching, and we can feel that shift happening in this movement as people begin to explore the relationships between humans and horses. And it's exciting, but it's also scary because we're also at that time where we don't quite have everything in order as we begin to, we just continue to evolve.
Yeah, and just for your information, if you go to the PATH website and you do a search for EAL competencies or guidelines or even the definition, they're all posted there. And I would encourage you to copy the guidelines and the competencies, because that right now is the foundation for what has been formalized so far. And so you can always be a part of, helping to continue developing the whole field of EAL. But that's the foundation. And so I really would like to encourage you. And if you have any feedback, on that, or have any other suggestions, we would love to have your input on that. So it's definitely what we call a living document. And so it is sure to change over the years.
Well, and available on PATH is an equine-assisted learning manual. And what's really interesting is, again, we wrote that manual at the beginning of this process, and it's amazing how much of it has changed. It's so much of it needs to be updated, and we will begin working on that to reflect all of the work that has gone on over the past few years, and to be able to update that information. And one of the things that we do as part of our mission is to collect information and data and do surveys around the world and work with all of these wonderful sister organizations that support equine-assisted learning and therapies around the world, and be able to ask their membership, how are things evolving? What does it look like overseas versus here in the US? And to be able to take that information, and we wrote some of that information up in the 2 articles that are in the Strides magazine. And the biggest takeaway looking forward is that this is the fastest growing area of equine-assisted activities and therapies, is this equine-assisted learning, because it can benefit so many different needs in the community. It's better for our horses to have a varied routine and to keep their brains engaged. And it's better for us as a profession because, again, we can have a much more sustainable business. And one of the things that we didn't discuss in one of the earlier slides is that part of the definition you can see is divided into 3 basic categories. So when we talk about the professional within this area of equine-assisted learning, there are 3 basic categories in which people are offering services, and that would be education, so school programs, programs for school-age children, those that deal with skills related to academic readiness, social skills within school, all of the breadth of need within that age range. And then we have the corporate group, which are team building, all of the just organizational development and leadership development and business schools. That's a huge application of equine-assisted learning. And then the other pocket being the self-growth, which is the coaching, which a lot of our veterans are coming for. They're looking for those life skills that they can move forward in their lives. It's where a lot of the victims of trauma and the trauma-based work comes in. We partner so nicely with the therapist and allow the therapist to do their work with the client. And then when they're ready to move on, they can slide into equine-assisted learning and move into the goal-based development. And then if they need to go back into therapy, they can. But it creates this wonderful continuum of practice. And again, that's a future trend as I see that growing. And I see those pockets of where we belong. I see those pockets growing as we find more avenues in which to do the work. So we'll continue gathering data and publishing the surveys and what it looks like around the world and what are the current trends in the industry. We'll continue to provide as many resources as we can, and just to support the industry in general. And we hope that you all will continue to do the same as we kind of just raise the bar of what we do. But we wanted to talk just a little bit about, that's a wrong slide, about what we do. I think something happened to our PowerPoint, but that's okay. We wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the magic of EAL, and we wanted to talk about, one of the big questions we get is, does it have to be all unmounted? Does it have to be, you know, is it all education? And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways to wrap your head around what it is it is a complement. It is a complement to therapeutic riding. It is a complement and can work in harmony with driving, with vaulting, and with mental health. It is the one thing that can go across the board and be partnered with any one of those disciplines. And so let's talk a little bit about therapeutic riding and what is it that's different in an EAL session or maybe a therapeutic riding session that has an EAL component. Well, again, remember when we defined EAL, it was about the life skill. It was about the life skill. And so in a therapeutic riding session, you always have your goals and objectives, you know, for that client. And they may be something like, you know, to be able to steer and guide the horse, or to pick up the reins and to use them effectively, or to, you know, stay balanced in the saddle, or to be able to walk a course or whatever. But those are the tasks that you're asking, you know, the riders to do. But what would it look like if you added a component that, let's say, and I'm creating here off the top of my head, but what if you said something about creativity, and you laid out a course, and there were the tasks that you had in your therapeutic riding class, but you gave them an opportunity to be creative and choose how they wanted to do that course. And you encourage them that there are no wrongs, that, you know, they can do anything that is comfortable and respectful for the horse and for them and for the staff. What if you focused in and taught them about creativity? You know, then would that make it an EAL session, or would that be therapeutic riding? Well, that's how you blend the two. You know, you can't, you teach a therapeutic riding class, and I think that's an important concept to understand, because there's two skills that an instructor needs. You teach your class, but then in EAL, it's more about facilitation. You offer a thought, you know, well, what is creativity? What does that mean to you? And you allow the student to kind of wander and ponder and discover, self-discover what creativity means to that particular person, and blend the teaching with the facilitating. So facilitating, you don't necessarily give them a concrete definition. It's the process of, again, discovering, making a decision, problem solving. That is, remember what the World Health Organization defined life skills as. So that's an open-ended type of facilitation. You lead someone, you suggest someone, you maybe guide them, but they come to their own conclusion about how it's relative to them.
Yep. Success is self-defined facilitation. So where we would be teaching a therapeutic riding skill such as steering or walk on and whoa in a mounted EAL session, it would not necessarily be focused on learning the skill. it would be on the journey of navigating that course and problem solving. Well, what do I do when? You know, what happens if I get stuck and I need to turn my horse around and navigate around something? Well, it's the problem solving process that happens there. And then with some sort of reflection at the end where you can help with what we call the transfer of learning. So in equine-assisted learning, we're trying to really focus on the intentionality of our programming and our activities so that whatever they're learning in the barn, really it becomes intentional about transferring that learning and that skill into their everyday life. But it definitely does complement all of the other professions. So we're lucky here at Strides in that we have full-time mental health professionals. We have full-time instructors. We've got this think tank of different professionals that all work together to create this custom experience for each individual that walks in the door.
Yeah, and I know that one of the big hurdles for therapeutic riding is that especially considering unmounted EAL sessions is, oh, my parents would never go for that. You know, they have this expectation that their student or their child is going to be riding, or they just wouldn't come. But, you know, it's really interesting because when we get a phone call about, let's say, oh, here's an interesting one. We got a phone call from a mom, a 5-year-old little girl that they had adopted from Africa. And she was perfectly fine making the adjustment to being adopted just fine, but there was one little problem. And that problem was that when she was in Africa, she was taught that all animals will hurt you. You know, if you wander away from the village, you could get eaten and killed. And so consequently, in her new home in America, she was terrified of all animals. Well, that wouldn't be so bad if the environment was so controlled that she never had to leave the house. She didn't have to go and see the neighbor's, you know, dog that was living right next door, or the cats that were, you know, running around. And this little girl was absolutely terrified. And so therapeutic riding would not be, we could not serve her in therapeutic riding, but in EAL, ooh, we could. And so being creative, we started out with a mechanical horse. We have this mechanical horse named Butterscotch. Many of you might have her. I don't know, we got her at Walmart several years ago, and she is awesome. You put batteries in her, and she moves her head, and she wags her tail, and she, you know, makes a sound, and she's just wonderful. But we started this little girl out with her and then transitioned her to grooming the minis and so on and so forth. So what do you call that? You know, it's not mental health. She's not got any mental health issues, but it was a really important life-changing thing. She needed to find courage. She needed to find confidence, and she needed self-assurance. And those were the life skills that we focused on in order to make that life change for that little girl. That is a great example of EAL. There was never an expectation that this young lady would ride, ever. And that's just one little example. And we get those kinds of calls all the time. Once the community realizes that you are more than a center that serves children with disabilities, they will just flock to you with the most unique challenges. And it's really quite exciting to try and figure out how the world of horses and how the horses and the animals and just the farm setting can help change their lives through discovering those life skills.
Well, and that brings up another group of people who may not be appropriate for therapy services. So we get a lot of people who are burned out on therapy. They have been in therapy for a long time. They speak the language very, very well. And they're refusing to go. Maybe they can need continued support because of anxiety and depression and other diagnoses, but they're refusing to go to therapy. This is a great way to kind of build a bridge back towards their goal, because we have fun. You know, we're about building relationships with the horse that they can do in such a rich way, on the ground or mounted, and be able to negotiate what it takes to be a good leader, negotiate all of the different questions that horses ask us all the time, if we would just become quiet and aware enough to listen and be able to just have moments to have that relationship and connect with the horse. Then maybe they get back to a point where they're ready to go back to therapy and ready to continue working on those goals. For us here, we always think of the biggest difference is we work on moving forward. We work on all of the different goals that they want to achieve by helping them to develop the skills necessary to meet those goals and help them problem solve the barriers that keep them from meeting those goals. And then we think of the role of the therapist to really help them process those past emotions, the adverse childhood event, the whatever in their past or their medical diagnosis, to be able to move forward to the goals. And we see that as such a nice relationship for those people who may not have another place to go.
That has been a real interesting partnership. Earlier in the presentation, we talked about partnering with other professions, and the partnership that EAL can provide with the mental health community is phenomenal. And to me, that I just love that kind of work. We have therapists from many different mental health agencies that call us all of the time and send clients of theirs that are in therapy and continuing with therapy. But we partner. The therapist will call and say, you know, okay, this person, I'm working on, you know, their trauma, but I really need for this client to discover their can-do attitude, you know, their courage. And so we'll set up some lessons and report back to that therapist, and it's wonderful. You feel kind of like the surgical nurse is to the surgeon. You know your scope, you know your lane, but you are helping. You are a resource that those mental health providers in your community can use. And it's just amazing. Again, it opens up so many different possibilities with working with Department of Children's Services, within foster care, within assisting different therapy agencies and coming together, and as long as you're focusing on those life skills and you're competent and you have your alignment with all of your resources with your therapist and such, it's just magical to do the EAL work.
Well, and that's the future of global health in general. Professions can no longer operate within a vacuum. We have to work together to meet the needs, because the needs are so much more complex than they used to be, and they require so much more for people to be able to move forward and move on to be contributing citizens of our community. And we have to learn to integrate with each other and learn to move along those lines that are not always easy, and to collaborate to meet those needs. And I think EAL is perfectly positioned to be able to do that within the context of global health. And I think that's what's really exciting. Mm-hmm. And so I think, as we look forward, we will continue to uncover what makes this work so special and why horses, and continue to develop what we need to make sure that the people offering the services are competent and qualified to do what they do. We've got in our presentation, we have copies of the link where you can find all of the different things that we've talked about. There we go. And the references there. So if you have any questions, they're here available on this link right here. It's where all of the equine-assisted learning definitions, competencies, guidelines, and that equine-assisted learning manual, that's available. And then if you have further questions for us, we would love to hear from you. And you can always find us on our website, which is stridetosuccess.org. You can reach Debbie or I via email if you have questions, if you would like more information on what we do and what we offer. We are definitely available.
Absolutely. And I think, if you have any questions about different trainings or offerings, we're very familiar with a broad scope of trainings. Between the two of us, I think we've been to just about everything. And so it's really, it's interesting because as you're piecing together EAL in your setting, we all have different opportunities that are poised to us. Some people have opportunities with certain agencies that are in their area. Some have other opportunities. And so what we like to do is we like to help people. We listen to what their personal goals are and what their vision is. And we are really good at helping people and pointing people to the right resources, whether it's us or whether it's someone else out in the industry, to help get you that education or that piece, those resources that you need that are specific to you, because there is no one EAL practice, if you will, that is the same. We all have different opportunities. So please use us as a resource. We're happy to do that. We even allow people to come. There's an opportunity where we can have people come and study with us for a week or two and be plugged right into the real life, EAL living in the arena. And so, so if anyone would be interested in doing that, please don't hesitate to give us a call.
Yep, and the immersion and training opportunities are all listed on the website, as well as the other classes that we offer.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess at this point, we're happy to open it up to specific questions that you might have. Are there any questions?
Well, thank you both so much. We do, in fact, have a few questions. The first that we've got is, we were asked, what are some other financial sources can you get specifically by having EAL programming?
Oh, I'd be happy to talk about that.
That's exciting stuff.
Yeah, it is exciting because, for example, we kept getting a lot of calls from here in Indiana. It's the Department of Children's Services, which is the state's organization where they control everything that goes on with the foster care kids and kids that are, social services. And so in trying to offer services, all the caseworkers and such were thrilled about the concept, but how do we get that paid? And so we found a way to develop a contract with them. And it's really interesting because we charge $75 per session, per hour session. That is our cost for a single person. And so when we told them the price, they didn't bat an eye. but they couldn't find a code in which to put us under. And so what we figured out was that we fit really nicely under the mentor code or the life coach code. And so that's how we were able to develop a contract with them. And the paperwork is minimal. It's not much more than what PATH requires us to do with, you know, our progress notes and such. And we turn that in once a month. And they continue. Once you get in the system, it's a constant referral, you know, piece. And I'm very careful to explain to them that we're not for every client. We're not, we're for those very special clients and kiddos that don't respond to any other traditional methods. And so they send us a lot of very, very unique cases. And that, again, feeds us and gets us excited about what we do. So that's one thing. The other thing is private pay parents. We have some parents, that are able to pay that $75 a week and without batting an eye. And then we have some parents that can't, and that's where the fundraising pieces, you know, come in. We have a certain amount of scholarships that we can give. It's not across the board. It's not available to everyone. It's on a case-by-case decision and process, in an internal process that we go through. But the $75 from the parents that can pay helps to kind of subsidize some of those that can't. And then we do our fundraising piece. As far as the corporate work has been really fun and interesting because when we get a call for, let's say, a corporate retreat, and there's a group of 15 in this office building, and they want to come out and they want to do a half a day team building, and then they want the other half to do some of their internal stuff. And so we fix that up, and the way that we charge for it is we usually charge between, I don't know, $1,000 and $3,500, somewhere in there for a half a day, and that's usually like 3 equine activities or 3 team building activities in the arena. And then we ask for a contribution to our scholarship fund. So it usually ends up that for every corporate group, we get about $5,000-ish. And they feel good. They love, you know, the fact that they're paying for their service that they would pay just like they would any place, but that they can also use their professional development dollars to make a contribution in addition to the payment. And it's a feel good. So they're happy, and plus it gets them familiar with our program and gives us a great way to network when we're looking for sponsorships and that kind of thing. So let's see, the other means, there's some other social service areas that we're connected with. There's some wraparound and collaborative care organizations that we're funded by. And so really by the EAL, actually from the state of Indiana, we're contracted with the state of Indiana, and they pay us more than they pay their therapist. I'm not saying that's right. There's therapists out there, but it's what we negotiated. And so we placed a value on what we do, and I guess we were the first ones, and so they didn't have anything else to go by, and they just accepted it. So that's how we do that.
And that's part of that strategy that we talked about. It's, creating different streams of income with, between the school contracts for services, not just, therapeutic riding, but also for leadership development and the kids there. Fee for service, so private pay for our clients, as well as reimbursed services through DCS, like she was talking about, and then utilizing the assets of this entire building and this farm where we can offer them, a half day of team building, and then they can use the classroom the rest of the day. We have a wonderful classroom. We have a kitchen. We've got those spaces that can be utilized for income as well. We've got offices that we can rent out to those professionals that want to use them. So again, it's creating multiple lines of income. So let's say something goes away, again, you're not vulnerable to losing income.
Yeah, we're big on the sustainability piece. We've been involved with too many centers that it's the whole fundraising, grant writing is just so cumbersome, and you hold your breath every year, and so we wanted to try something different, and this model is working. It's working.
You said you had some other questions?
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more question, and I think this is a perfect one to end on. How often does an EAL lesson translate to multiple participants, or is it always case by case?
No, we have several groups. We do a group of veterans, women veterans, and they enjoy the sociability of the group, and so they love to be together. We also do we have a contract with a residential facility that houses children that have been sex trafficked, and so we have a boys group on one day and a girls group on the other, and we ask that the group not be any larger than 8. So and those are our major groups. The rest of them are kind of they are individuals, and they come with such unique goals that it would be very difficult, and I think diluting for them to be in a group. So it's kind of a case by case. Now we do have group activities that we do. For example, some of our EAL students that have private sessions during the week, they will come, if they're part of our leadership program, they will come and work all together on Saturdays, and they will volunteer and do some fun activities together. So, but as far as the horse work, their sessions are one-on-one. So we kind of have a mixture, and again, that variety and that diversity of doing groups, because there's some activities that really require the group dynamics in order to focus on a particular life skill. But we also incorporate a lot of natural horsemanship into our private sessions, and I find that is a wonderful medium for facilitation, is working with natural horsemanship, and that's a lot easier, at least for us, to do one-on-one.
Well, thank you both so much for your time today. Wonderful and in-depth information on EAL, and I think we've all learned a little bit on how we can separate our EAL from our EFP, keep our different ideas clean, and move forward into what the future holds for EAL. So thank you both for your time today, Blair and Debbie.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Welcome. Thank you for having us. It's been fun.
Pleasure. Just as a reminder to all of our participants, you will, with the purchase of this live webinar, receive a recording as well. So if you missed anything or had to walk away for a moment, you'll be able to check back in on that after all is said and done. For any of those of you who would like the PowerPoint presentation, please just let us know here at the PATH offices. You can either reach out to me at eholdman@pathintl.org or Rachel Moore at rmoore@pathintl.org. We thank you all for joining us today. It's you that help us as participants to make all of our education possible, and we hope that we'll see you all again for our next in this series, the Stride Seminar Beyond the Article, next time with Stephanie Roeder on May 22nd at 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you again next time.